I spent 4 years waiting for this. 4 years building everything I have specifically so I could watch Clive lose everything he values most. And if you're wondering why I call my own father by his first name now, keep reading. Growing up, I was the backup son. My brother Miles was the athlete, the one Clive coached through every football season, drove to every tournament. I was the one who got decent grades and stayed out of trouble, which apparently meant I required zero attention. Clive had this obsession with legacy and appearances. Miles played college ball for 2 years before his knee gave out. But in Clive's mind, Miles was still the golden child. I went into trade work after high school because I was good with my hands and saw no point in debt. Clive told everyone who would listen that I had no ambition, that I was wasting my potential. The funny thing is, my mom Diane never disagreed with him out loud. She just stayed quiet. She was always staying quiet. The celebration was for their 30th wedding anniversary in October 2021. Diane called me 3 times asking if I was coming. I lived about 9 hours away at that point, had my own place, was doing okay. I said yes because some stupid part of me still wanted them to see I was doing fine. I drove my 2018 Tacoma straight through because I couldn't afford to lose a workday. I got there Saturday afternoon. Miles was already inside with his girlfriend Isabel, and Clive barely acknowledged me when I walked in. Just a nod. Dinner was at some Italian place Clive liked. The whole extended family packed into a private room. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, aunts, uncles. Everyone dressed nice. I wore what I had. Yo, 9 hours. 9 hours this man drove. Couldn't even afford to take a day off work, so he white-knuckled it straight through. And for what? For a nod. Not a hug. Not a good to see you, son. Not even a fake performative, hey, look who made it, for the relatives. A nod. Like he's the UPS guy dropping off a package. And you can already feel what's coming, right? Because we've all been in rooms where we can feel we don't belong, where everyone's dressed nice and you wore what you had. That line hit me. I wore what I had. That's not just about clothes. That's about showing up to a family that already decided you weren't enough, and knowing it before you even walked through the door, but going anyway because some broken part of you still hopes maybe this time they'll see you. About an hour into dinner, someone asked what I was doing for work these days. I started explaining my HVAC certification, how I was taking on commercial jobs now, making decent money. And Clive just cut me off mid-sentence. He told the whole table I was nothing but a disgrace, that all I ever did was take, that I never brought this family a single moment of pride. He said if I had any self-respect left, I should leave and not come back. The room went dead. Miles rolled his eyes and kept scrolling on his phone. Diane looked at her plate. Not one person said anything in my defense. I sat there for maybe 10 seconds, then got up and walked out. No scene, no argument. Just left. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes trying to figure out what to do. I had nowhere to go. All the hotels nearby were booked because of some college event. I ended up driving to a gas station about a mile away and parking behind it near the dumpsters. I slept in my truck that night with my jacket as a pillow. At one point, I woke up and just stared at the ceiling, wondering what exactly I did to make my own father hate me that much. The next morning, I drove home. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. Diane texted me 2 days later asking why I left so suddenly, like she hadn't been sitting right there. I didn't respond. Miles never reached out at all. I need everyone to really sit with this image for a second. This grown man, who drove 9 hours to be there, who's working his way up, getting certifications, building a real career with his hands, is sleeping behind a gas station next to dumpsters, using his jacket as a pillow, while 30 of his own blood relatives are probably back at that restaurant finishing dessert. Nobody checking their phone like, hey, where did he go? Is he okay? Nobody. And Diane, texting 2 days later, why did you leave so suddenly? Ma'am, you were there. You watched your husband verbally execute your child in front of the whole family tree, and your response was to examine your pasta like it held the secrets of the universe. That's not neutrality. That's not staying out of it. Silence in moments like that is a choice. And she chose Clive. She's been choosing Clive every single day for this kid's entire life. The quiet parent isn't the safe parent. They're the one who lets it happen. That was the moment I stopped being their son in any way that mattered. But I didn't just cut them off and move on with my life. That would have been the healthy thing to do. Instead, I spent the next 4 years making very specific decisions. Every promotion, every investment, every connection I built had a purpose behind it. Because I knew eventually Clive would need something from me. And when that day came, I wanted to be ready. What I didn't expect was how it would actually happen. And honestly, the situation that brought Clive crawling back is almost too perfect, but I'll get into that in the update. Update 1. A lot of people asked what Clive actually needed from me. Here's the context. After that anniversary dinner, I threw myself into work. Not to heal, but because I wanted to build something they would eventually need. I got my contractor's license in 2022. By 2023, I was running my own small crew doing commercial HVAC and residential remodels. By 2024, I had 3 guys working under me and contracts with 2 property management companies. I bought a duplex, lived in one unit, rented the other. Nothing crazy but solid. Every time I signed a new contract, I thought about Clive's face when he called me a disgrace. Meanwhile, things at the family house were falling apart. I found this out through my Aunt Evelyn, Diane's sister. She was the only one who checked in after that dinner. She told me Clive retired in 2022 and his pension was less than expected. The house needed a new roof and the furnace was dying. Miles moved back in after Isabel left him in early 2024. 3 adults, 1 income, mounting repair costs, and Clive's pride keeping him from asking for help. Then, in August 2025, Diane messaged me. First contact in almost 4 years. She said they were having trouble with the house and asked if I could recommend someone affordable for HVAC work. She knew what I did. She was testing the waters. 4 years of complete silence, and the first thing out of her mouth is, "Can you recommend someone affordable for HVAC work?" Not, "I'm sorry," not, "I've thought about that night every day," not, "I should have defended you." Just, "Hey, so anyway, we need something from you now." The audacity of framing it as, "Can you recommend someone?" when she knows he does this for a living. She's not asking for a recommendation. She's seeing if he'll take the bait. And honestly, this is such a parent move. The ones who hurt you the worst always think enough time passing means the slate is wiped clean. Like 4 years of silence is a reset button. Nah. 4 years of silence means you had 1,460 days to reach out and apologize. And you chose not to until your furnace died. I waited 3 days to respond. When I did, I asked why she was reaching out after years of silence. She gave me this long explanation about how families go through rough patches and Clive never meant what he said the way it sounded. Classic Diane. Still not admitting what happened. I told her I remembered exactly what he said. Word for word. I also remembered her sitting there pretending not to hear. She said she didn't know what to say in that moment and regretted it. I asked why she never reached out after. And she said Clive told her to give me space. So she followed his lead for 4 years, like always. Then she got to the real point. The furnace died completely. Cheapest quote was $8,000 for a basic replacement. They didn't have it. Miles was barely working, picking up warehouse shifts when he could. Clive's pension covered bills, but not emergencies. She asked if I could do the work at cost or set up a payment plan. Here's where it gets interesting. Evelyn had mentioned months earlier that Clive and Diane were looking at selling the house because they couldn't keep up. But they owed more than they thought because Clive took out a second mortgage in 2019 to pay for Miles's knee surgery when insurance didn't cover everything. So they were underwater, couldn't afford repairs, and had no way out. I told Diane I needed to think about it. What I was actually doing was letting her sit with the silence. Then Clive texted me. First time since that night. He said Diane told him we talked, and that he knew I was doing well in HVAC. He said he was willing to discuss things like adults. If I was. No apology, no acknowledgement, just willing to talk if I was. Willing to discuss things like adults. If I was. Bro, the way I just threw my head back laughing. Clive is really sitting there in his crumbling house, furnace dead. Second mortgage from paying for the golden child's knee surgery. And he's still trying to frame himself as the reasonable one, being patient with his difficult son. This man's pride is absolutely undefeated. Like the house is literally falling apart around him and he still can't just say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong, please help." He has to word it like he's the one extending an olive branch. Like he's doing OP a favor by being willing to talk. The delusion is honestly impressive at this point. And can we talk about that second mortgage for Miles's knee surgery? So let me get this straight. The no-ambition disgrace son is out here building a business, buying property, creating actual generational wealth, and the golden child athlete needed daddy to literally mortgage the house to fix his knee after his football career ended in 2 years? And Clive still couldn't give OP an ounce of respect? The lack of self-awareness is genuinely pathological. That's when I knew exactly how this was going to go. But first, I needed to see the house myself. Update 2. I drove out to see the house on a Saturday in early September. 9 hours again. Same route I took 4 years ago when I still thought showing up mattered. The place looked rough. Paint peeling, gutters sagging, front steps cracked. Inside was worse. The furnace wasn't just dead, it was 20 years past its lifespan. The water heater was corroded. The roof had visible damage from the living room ceiling where water stains spread across the plaster. This wasn't a house that needed one repair. This was a house that needed $40,000 minimum to be livable long-term. Clive greeted me at the door like nothing happened. Just a nod and a, "Let's talk in the kitchen." Diane hovered around offering coffee, nervous energy radiating off her. Miles sat on the couch scrolling his phone. Barely looked up when I walked in. Some things never change. I did a walkthrough and took notes. Clive followed me room to room, explaining how each problem wasn't that bad, how they'd been managing fine, how they just needed the furnace handled before winter. I let him talk. When we got back to the kitchen, I laid it out straight. The furnace alone was $8,000 minimum for a decent unit plus labor. But the roof needed attention within a year, or they'd have structural damage. The water heater was a hazard. Total repairs would run $35,000 to $45,000, and that was with me doing labor at cost. Clive's face went tight. He said they didn't have that kind of money, and I knew that. I told him I did know that. I also knew they were underwater on the mortgage and couldn't sell without taking a loss. He asked how I knew about the mortgage, and I told him Evelyn mentioned it. He got angry about Evelyn running her mouth about family business. Then Miles finally spoke up. He walked into the kitchen and asked if I was enjoying this, rubbing their faces and how well I was doing while they struggled. I told him I was just giving them an honest assessment. He said I always had to make everything about myself, that I left the family when things got hard and now I was back to gloat. I asked him when exactly I left. Was it before or after our father told me to leave and never come back in front of 30 relatives? Miles said Clive was just frustrated that night and I took it too personally. I asked if he remembered what he was doing while our father humiliated me. He said he didn't remember the details. I told him he was scrolling his phone, couldn't even be bothered to look up. Miles is still on his phone when OP walks in. Still, 4 years later, the family is in crisis. They need OP's help desperately. And this man is on the couch scrolling while his brother, the one person who could save them, walks through the door and then has the nerve to accuse OP of making everything about himself? Bro, you haven't looked up from your screen in 4 years. You are the definition of checked out. You contributed nothing to this family except a blown knee and a mortgage your parents are still paying off. You're 32, living at home, doing warehouse shifts when you can, and you really walked into that kitchen with your chest puffed up talking about, "Are you enjoying this?" And, "I don't remember the details." Nah, you remember. You absolutely remember. You just don't want to admit that you sat there and let it happen because confrontation would have been inconvenient for you. The phone was easier. The phone is always easier for people like Miles. Can't be expected to defend your brother if you didn't technically see it happen, right? Diane tried to calm things down. She said we were all family and needed to work together. I asked her what family meant to her because from where I stood, it meant staying quiet while one son gets destroyed and then reaching out 4 years later when you need his skills. She started crying. Clive told me I was being cruel. I told him I learned from the best. Here's what I didn't tell them. I'd already looked into their mortgage situation before I came. The house was worth maybe $180,000 in current condition. They owed $165,000 between both mortgages. If they tried to sell, they'd barely break even after fees. But if they couldn't afford repairs, the value would only drop. They were trapped unless someone with cash and construction skills stepped in. I told them I'd think about options and get back to them. What I was really doing was letting them sweat, while I figured out exactly how much leverage I actually had. Then Evelyn texted me that night. She said Clive had been telling extended family for years that I refused to help when they asked, that I turned my back on them. He'd been lying to save face this whole time. I learned from the best. That line is going to live in Clive's head rent-free for the rest of his life. And you know what? He knows it's true. That's why it stung. Because Clive spent decades modeling exactly this. Cold, calculated pride over everything. He taught his son that love is conditional, that worth is measured in what you provide for the family image, that weakness gets you humiliated in public. And now that same energy is pointed directly at him? And suddenly it's cruel? Suddenly, we need to be family and work together? But the Evelyn revelation is where my jaw actually dropped. This man has been running a 4-year smear campaign. 4 years of telling everyone at every holiday, every gathering, every family chat that OP abandoned them. That OP refused to help. When the only contact in all those years was Diane, asking why he left suddenly, like she wasn't there. Clive didn't just hurt OP once in that restaurant. He's been hurting him continuously, behind his back, poisoning every single family relationship OP might have had. This isn't just about pride anymore. This is about a man who would rather destroy his own son's reputation than admit he was wrong for even 1 second. Final update. After Evelyn told me about Clive's lies, I asked her exactly what he'd been saying. She said at every family gathering for 4 years, Clive told people I abandoned them when they needed help, that I got successful and forgot where I came from, that they reached out multiple times and I ignored them. Complete fabrication. The only contact before Diane's message in August was Diane's text 2 days after the dinner asking why I left suddenly. I had that text saved. I screenshot it and sent it to Evelyn. Proof they never asked me for anything until now. The next weekend I drove back out. Not for them. For me. I asked Clive to sit down at the kitchen table because I had something to say. Diane and Miles were there too. I told Clive I knew what he'd been telling people, that I refused to help them, that I abandoned the family. I watched his face go from confused to defensive in about 2 seconds. He said he may have vented to relatives when he was frustrated, that it wasn't lying, it was expressing how he felt. I asked how he could feel abandoned by someone he told to leave and never come back. He said I was twisting his words from that night, that he was emotional and didn't mean it literally. I told him 30 people heard him say I was a disgrace who never brought the family pride, that if I had any self-respect I should leave and not come back. Those were his exact words. I'd replayed them in my head every single day for 4 years. Did he think I forgot? He said I was holding on to one bad moment and ignoring everything else. I asked what else there was. What good memories was I supposed to be weighing against public humiliation? He couldn't answer. What good memories was I supposed to be weighing against public humiliation? And Clive couldn't answer, because there aren't any. That's the thing about being the invisible child. You don't have a bank of good memories to draw from. You can't go, well, yeah, that time was rough, but remember when Dad took me to the game? Or remember when he showed up to my graduation beaming? Because those moments don't exist. OP was background noise his entire childhood. He was decent grades and staying out of trouble and no attention required. So when Clive says, you're holding on to one bad moment, no, he's holding on to the only moment his father ever truly acknowledged his existence. And it was to destroy him. And this whole, I was just venting. I didn't mean it. I was emotional. You're twisting my words. This is the narcissist's playbook, page 1. Everything is reframed. Everything gets softened in hindsight. He didn't tell you to leave. He was just frustrated. He didn't lie to the family. He was expressing his feelings. Words stop meaning what they mean when it's time to take accountability. Then I laid out my terms. I told him I would help with the house. Full repairs, furnace, roof, water heater, everything. At cost. But first, he was going to send a message to every family member who was at that anniversary dinner, admitting what he said to me and admitting he lied about me refusing to help afterward. If he did that, I'd save their house. If he didn't, they could figure it out themselves. Clive said I was trying to humiliate him. I told him I was giving him a chance to fix what he broke. He said he wasn't going to grovel to the whole family because I couldn't let go of the past. Diane begged him to just do it, that they needed the help. Miles told me I was being petty and vindictive. I told Miles the difference between us was that I built something with my life while he moved back in with our parents at 32 with nothing to show for it. He had no room to lecture me about anything. Clive refused. Said he'd rather lose the house than let me control him like that. So I stood up and told them good luck with winter. I walked out. Clive would rather be homeless than apologize. Read that again. This man looked at the choice between send a text admitting what you did and lose your home and make your wife and adult son homeless too. And he chose pride. He chose to drag Diane and Miles down with him rather than experience 5 minutes of discomfort sending a group text. And somehow OP is the petty one? OP offered him everything at cost. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars in free labor and discounted materials. And all he had to do was tell the truth. Not even grovel. Not get on his knees. Just tell the truth about what happened and what he said afterward. And Clive said no. This is what pathological pride looks like, guys. This is a man who has spent his entire life building an image, and he would literally rather watch that image burn down around him than admit it was never real. Because if he sends that message, if he admits what he said, then everyone knows. Everyone knows the story Clive told for 4 years was a lie. And Clive cannot survive in a world where people see who he actually is. That was October. By December, the pipes froze because they couldn't afford temporary heating solutions. The house took water damage. In January, they listed it as a distressed sale and got $140,000. After paying off both mortgages and fees, they walked away with almost nothing. They're renting a 2-bedroom apartment now. Clive, Diane, and Miles, all 3 of them. My phone blew up in February. Clive sending message after message saying, I destroyed this family. That I could have helped but chose revenge. I read every single one and laughed. He finally understood what I did. I built my whole life around being ready for this moment. And when it came, I made him choose between his pride and his home. He chose pride, just like I knew he would.